Hi everyone, welcome to another one of E6 Fireside Chats. I know it's been a while since I've recorded one. It was Camporee the last few weeks, and as all leaders know, we worked 25 hours a day for a few weeks straight to make Camporee happen. And when you figure out the math on how that really works out, let me know, because I've yet to figure that out. But I'm out here sitting by my fire. It's crackling along merrily, getting ready for dinner. We cook on the fire pretty regularly most of the summer. Gets the heat out of the house, especially when you live on these old drafty houses like I do. So, leading up to Camporee, I had a whole lot of talks with a whole lot of clubs as we were talking to them, trying to get them ready for Camporee and get everything organized. And it never fails if you call a leader up and you say, hey, you got this ready for Camporee? Did you get that memo? We didn't hear a response from this email. They respond, yeah. But then you talk about something else. It never fails because they have questions. And whether I got you on the line, they are going to ask you. And I had a whole bunch of questions around a few topics. I'm going to make a series of videos on here. Today we're talking about Pathfinders on the Sabbath. Some of our clubs have to do Pathfinders on the Sabbath and some don't. And there's some discussions about, well, is that really appropriate? So, we're going to go down a little bit of the do's and don'ts here, and also the why fors, why maybe you have to do it, and talk about maybe how you can present that to your church better so they can understand it as well. So, a few reasons why your Pathfinders may have to do it on Sabbath versus another day of the week. Growing up, we did it on Wednesday. We did it during prayer meeting. All the adults who weren't part of Pathfinders were in prayer meeting. The rest of us were having fun doing activities in the gym and on the church lawn and stuff. And that worked out really good when I was a kid. When I was a director, I taught mainly on Sundays, but I spent many years doing Saturdays too. And, for different reasons. Many of our clubs meet Sunday. Some of ours meet Monday. I know the club meets Thursday. But a lot of our clubs, more and more of them are being forced into Saturday. And here's the nuts and bolts of it. Kids are doing so many activities that they have no time for Pathfinders. And you're like, that's crazy. Pathfinders is such a great, amazing thing. But a lot of our clubs treat Pathfinders like another Sabbath school class. It's just another class at church, and they don't really get out and doing anything with it, and therefore it's not a big priority in the kids' lives. If you have a kid in ice skating, you don't miss a lesson. And it doesn't matter when they schedule it, except for maybe Sabbath. And still I see couples drift away from church because they'll still make ice skating that priority, or whatever else is, dance, gymnastics, martial arts, riding, horsemanship. I know a family, they got pulled out of church because all the horse competitions are on Saturday in this part of the world, and they chose horses over church. And but people will make choices on what is important for their families. And the question is your Pathfinder club, or Adventurer club, or a Master Guide club, is being part of your club more important to the kids and their families than something else? Now, families have lots of things in that equation. So for a lot of families could it help the kids get a scholarship someday? Because school costs so much. A lot of families are like, can you help me get a scholarship? Well, Pathfinders Adventures is not going to get you a scholarship. So, one strike against us. Will my kids have physical activity? Will they have to get out and doing something physical? Depends on your club. That could go either way. Is my kid learning good social skills? Are they learning life skills? I would hope that's a yes, but I know several clubs where that's probably a no. And a lot of clubs might depend on what week you catch them on. So then that's an iffy one. So now we got 1 for, 2 ifs, 1 against. See, we're not looking too good. Do I have time to take my kids to it? More and more of our churches, they were built in a nice central location. They used to be surrounded by communities. More and more of our church members are moving out into the suburbs. They want the big house, the nice car. There is no church there. We Adventists as a whole don't build many new churches. Where I live in Utah, when a neighborhood goes up, a church, usually the LDS wards, but not always, sometimes other religions do it, a lot of the LDS wards, they'll buy lots in the development to make sure there's room for their churches. So in the neighborhood, there's churches, or in that new development area. And eventually one of our churches will move in, and a lot of times they start in a family living room, they'll move to a community center, they'll move into a storefront, and a lot of times they end up buying somebody else's church, and then, but not very often do we actually see an Adventist plant in a new neighborhood, build a new church, and grow with the community. So our people are moving into the nice houses, but those nice houses, those nice neighborhoods are further and further from the church. When your kids can walk to Pathfinders, it's easy, right? But when your kids when you have to drive them to Pathfinders, the kids can walk to Pathfinders while you start dinner and be home by the time dinner's ready. That's an easy one, right? But with the kids, you have to get together, you have to drive your kids, and you got to drive them an hour through traffic to church to do Pathfinders. The calculus is changing in your head. You're like, I have to drive them there for an hour. They're going to be there for an hour. We got to drive home for an hour. The kids still have homework to do. We still have band practice. We have dance thing. Joe hasn't finished his homework yet. Oh, and I got to bake cupcakes for the bake sale. You see where that goes. Pretty quickly, a club that could meet for 45 minutes to an hour is actually, for the average family, a 3-hour ordeal. And maybe that means, okay, we don't do regular dinner that night. We're going to do takeout on the way. Now you've added the cost of Pathfinders. A lot of clubs charge dues, like 50 cents, maybe $1 or something, right? But now you have the cost, let's say, gas. But maybe if you have to do takeout or drive-through or something, right? You now eating out, family of, let's say, 4, you just drop $50, right? The further away you are, the more gas. So to have the kids in Pathfinders, the more it costs, the more beneficial the kids have to get out to outweigh those parents who are in the balance. They're like, is this going to be more valuable to my children than this? And for more and more of our families, the cost is the outweigher. Or it's too much time, too much effort. Or it takes away from other extracurricular activities. Like in those 3 hours, we could have done 3 other things. We could have done dance, soccer, and karate if we only had to drive 5 minutes down the street to do them. Versus driving across town. That's 3 for 1. Families start making these decisions. Kids are crying to their parents, I want to do this, do this. More and more parents nowadays don't schedule for their kids. They let their kids run them on what they want to do. So if the kids aren't enjoying Pathfinders so much that they'd rather do it, and the parents look at that calculus and go, oh, it's worth it, pretty soon they don't want to come. Now you're losing weekdays. Weekdays are gone because the family gets home from work. They don't have the time, the energy, they don't see it worth taking the kids back to church to do Pathfinders. And then Sundays, you got a lot of open time on Sundays, but a lot of families in the Adventist world, Sundays are work day. That's when you mow the lawn. That's when you catch up the laundry. That's when you wipe down the kitchen. That's whatever you do in your house to keep it nice. That's when you wash the car, right? That's Sunday. So if Pathfinders is on Sunday, we'll start the calculus all over again. How much of my time and effort is it going to take to get the kids to Pathfinders to make it worth versus the number of chores I can't get done now while doing this? Because again, if they could just walk to Pathfinders, Or it's a quick little drive. You go, you drop them off, you go do some errands, you come back, you pick them up, you go home. That's easy, right? You're probably going to do them anyway. And you don't want to haul those screaming children with to the store saying, I want, right? That's good. But if you have to drive an hour, you're thinking differently. Because you're in the car with those kids for an hour, doing whatever a kid's doing, yelling, screaming, fighting with each other, adding to your grocery list. So again, that calculus starts taking place. Is this more important to us than everything else I could get done? And if it starts going no, your club's going to start suffering. So pretty quickly, a lot of clubs start looking at Sabbath. They're like, well, they're already here. They've already driven their hour, right? All we have to do is convince them to bring a lunch with them. And after church, we can do it in the fellowship hall. And that makes sense, right? I mean, they're already here. And maybe the adults could do some Bible study. The pastor usually has an afternoon Bible study or something. Or there's a community service project going. They can go pass out, some literature evangelism. Well, you are working with the kids. And hopefully your staff, not you by yourself, right? That's insane. So, there's your balance you are trying to deal with. And unless you're aware that you're in competition with people's time, you're going to lose it. Very few people win races they don't know they're part of. Now, so you need to make this very clear to your church that this has to be an important thing in their lives. But if it's not that important, when the calculus starts saying we don't have time for this, they're going to drop it. Now let's flip on to another side of this. Pathfinders on the Sabbath. There's a whole lot of people in your church who say, this isn't a church activity, this is a scouting activity. It should not be done during Sabbath hours. I've had people complain about, you can't do drill on the Sabbath. We can't do arts and crafts on the Sabbath. You certainly can't do vocational stuff on the Sabbath. There's none of that exercise stuff on the Sabbath. They start really limiting what you can do really fast, right? So you're like, okay, on Sabbath, how can we do this? My church, more conservative, older members who probably run my board have said, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. But if I don't do it on Sabbath, we don't have Pathfinders. Now, anybody who's diehard Pathfinder like I am knows some Pathfinders is better than no Pathfinders for any kid. And the more Pathfinders, usually the better for almost any kid, right? The more we get them out and doing stuff, any stuff, the better kids are. And that's just in general kids, right? The better we involve with our kids, the better our kids turn out. You want bad kids, just don't be involved with them. Pretty simple. Let them do their own thing. Pretty quick, you got spoiled, rotten brats who think that you're their butler instead of their parents, right? Or their Pathfinder leader. So, how are we going to look at doing Pathfinder Sabbath? Or here's another question. How do you justify it? I mean, I had one leader, she was upset. She's like, I have to do Pathfinder to Sabbath, and I'm not comfortable with it. And she was aware that her own uncomfortability with it was hurting her club because it showed she didn't like it. And because they could tell that she didn't like it, it was affecting the whole club. And that makes perfect sense, right? It's hard to have people in the room which don't like something and trying to lead out in it, because everybody knows, I mean, abandoned ship, this thing's going down, right? Somebody just lit it off like the Hindenburg, Titanic just struck an iceberg. So you in your own mind have to be good with this, and your church has to be good with it, especially the church board, but then the church membership at large has to be good with this, because your leaders got to lead it, your church board has to approve your activities, and your church has to be buying in and coming. If you don't have these things, you're now off Sabbath for doing Pathfinders, but now you're dealing with the calculus of the week we already talked about, right? Because some of our clubs are people moving further out. If you don't have that problem, great for you guys, though. That is wonderful. But be mindful of that calculus, because as your people start moving further away, it will come into play, even if it's not right now for your church. So now you have to pick and choose, what are we doing on the Sabbath? I was talking with with my leaders at my church once on the board, and it's like they were saying, well, when we had to do a Sabbath, and the leader's like, well, you obviously drill and march things out. You can't drill and march on the Sabbath. And I'm like, okay. Like, you do know on Pathfinder Sabbath, they march into church. They're like, well, that's different. They're showing their drill. They're not competing or learning drill. I'm like, okay, the learning drill is out on the Sabbath, but doing it for the church is okay. And they're like, yeah, that's what we're saying. I'm like, okay, the reasoning's a little, we're not going to argue. I would say competition's out on the Sabbath, but if you're not allowed to learn it, should you do it on the Sabbath? That's funky discussion there. But you need to have this in your head, right? You gotta have this conversation with your church. Now, I had people say, well, arts and crafts. What kind of arts and crafts are you doing on the Sabbath? You can't be doing that on the Sabbath. I'm like, have you looked what happens in the Sabbath school classrooms? We do our prayers, we do our singing, they do a Bible story, and oh my, there's a craft every week. A Bible church-centered craft every week. You know in Pathfinder is what we do, right? Bible-centered church craft almost every week. And believe it or not, the board member actually said, well, that's different. Okay, that's different. Nature honors. Nature honors are good with. They were good as long as we didn't have to exercise to do them. I'm like, wait. How about going hiking? And you're like, oh, you can't go hiking. Like, does your family go hiking after church? Well, yeah, but that's a family nature thing. I'm like, well, why can't my Pathfinders do a family nature thing? And so I had to have these discussions with different board members at different times and go over it. And finally I asked one lady, she was real obstinate against anything and everything we were doing. I'm like, what do you think these kids are doing on the Sabbath? And she's like, well, obviously they're sitting at home with their families doing Bible study and meditating and focusing on God's creation. And I'm like, you don't get out and visit our church members very much, do you? And she was an older lady and on the board, a wonderful person, mind you. But she was living 70 years out of date. Maybe only 60. No, 70. She's in her 90s. Yeah, it was 70 years out of date on what kids do. And I'm like, you need to visit some of our church families and find out what the kids are doing. It's like, well, what are they doing? I'm like, well, I know one family, they get home and they're playing Halo. It's like, what's Halo? I'm like, it's a first-person shooting game. I think they drop ship into a planet and take it over or something like that, or some sort of war reenactment game, sci-fi. Okay, guys, you can tell I haven't played Halo. I'm guessing from the cover and some trailers I saw on TV. But I know these kids were playing Halo at different kids' house. You know, the families would get together upstairs and do a church social thing. The kids were literally playing Halo downstairs. I'd walked downstairs. I'd seen them doing it. Nobody cared. I was offended. I mentioned it to the parents upstairs. Like, yeah, you know, our kids are playing Halo downstairs, and they're like, as long as they're quiet. I'm like, that was a Sabbath afternoon activity. So, let's have a real discussion. What are your kids doing on Sabbath if they're not doing Pathfinders? Have this discussion with your board and be honest with them. Let them know, you know. And yeah, you'll have board members who are, I think they were born with a suit and tie and a Bible, and their kids came out the same way. And they'll assure you their kids, the saints they are, would never do anything inappropriate on the Sabbath. Well, good for them. What about the rest of their church? Okay, there's a reason you're the elder and your daughter leads the choir and all that. You guys are saints. Okay, we know that. Pathfinders for the whole church. You tell me what all those other kids in church are doing if they're not in Pathfinders on Sabbath afternoon. Go visit a few houses. Go visit houses and find out for yourself what the kids are doing. You're going to be shocked. And you're not going to see much church stuff going on. It's appalling. Our families are terrible at providing proper Sabbath afternoon activities for our Pathfinders. And Once I had a grasp on what was really going on with my Pathfinders on Sabbath afternoon, I never felt guilty ever again doing Pathfinders on Sabbath afternoon. I mean, I was okay doing water balloon fights on the grass of the church lawn after church even. It was like they were cooling off and it was summer, and tossing water balloons. I mean, it wasn't a full-out fight. We were tossing the balloons, thinking who could catch, moving further out. A little competitive, but fun on a hot, wet day. But I kept in my mind, what would these kids be doing if I wasn't doing an activity? And that was just the activity we did between stuff. We still had our Bible, we still had our devotional, we still had our coursework, all that, and that was a game in the middle. I had no problem with my kids learning how to do the moves for drill. Not so much getting ready for drill team. If we had a drill team preparing for Camp Ree, I kept that as a separate activity, because competition and Sabbath don't mix. You can't really mix them. PBEs come about as close as I've seen to anybody succeeding to that. And there's still times I see clubs so competitive, I'm like, you're wrong spirit, folks. Take a time out, take a chill pill. Remember why we're doing this. I'm sorry. When your kids are breaking down crying because you're pushing them so hard, you're not doing the Bible thing much anymore here. You're in the world competition mode. And I have. Those for you guys who are really competitive at PBE, I've had your kids call me and ask me to tell you guys to tone it down. And those of you guys who I've called to tell you to tone it down, now you know who ratted you out, your own kids. But the Sabbath afternoon activities must stay Christ-centered. There needs to be a growing, developing purpose to it. Vocational honors are pretty much out. I can't think of any good biblical reasons to hang wallpaper or do small engine repair. But maybe in the summer you can get the kids together, do some Sunday classes or something. Maybe once a month do a Sunday, more of a recreational day kind of thing. But you can bring Bible into everything. I mean, you could be outside doing all sorts of stuff. I mean, yeah, you're not doing soccer tournaments, basketball tournaments. Yeah, there's honors for those, but they're not really a Bible thing. And most of a lot of the recreational track, archery, not much of a Sabbath thing. But knot tying, there's no reason why you can't learn how to tie a knot on the Sabbath. There's no reason why you can't go hiking on the Sabbath. Exercise is good for you. And you can't tell me Jesus didn't walk anywhere on the Sabbath. Boy, did he do a lot of walking. Maybe in his day, the thought of extra walking on the Sabbath would be outrageous, but for us, that's how we walk and see nature. Some of it's the only time we see nature, which is where we do most of our best Bible lessons. Getting out, doing a nature hike after church is, I know for a lot of our churches, not even controversial. It's mainstay. It's like the only time the church gets out together outside the sanctuary is for the church hike or the church picnic, right? So, when balancing Pathfinders on Sabbath versus doing the rest of the week, let's recap. What are your family's time worth? Is your Pathfinder club worth their time? And if you're doing on the Sabbath, are you keeping it Christ-focused enough? And keep in your mind, if you aren't doing it, what are they doing? Part of what you're doing on the Sabbath when doing Pathfinders is teaching the kids how to be active and respect the Sabbath. You're leading by example here. So, because these kids don't think of anything else to do besides go home and play Halo. I mean, yeah, the saints in your church might think, oh, I can practice my piano because they're going to do How Great Thou Art next week at church. But not every one of us has that for Sabbath. So, keep teaching the kids how to play to keep Christ centered in their life is a good thing. You're going to do more good than harm as long as you remember that there's some balance there. Tearing apart small engines, it's not good. You can't make a Bible reason for it. But There's no reason why the kids can't do glass etching. There's no reason why the kids can't do origami. There's no reason why the kids can't do pretty much any nature honor. The community service honors, most of them can be done on the Sabbath. There's a few things where you really have to get out and do stuff. And a lot of that depends on how you do it. If you're doing community service, cleaning up a roadside on the Sabbath might be not good for a Sabbath activity, but dropping off boxes of food baskets to sick and shut-ins, that's a community service. Very appropriate to do on the Sabbath. So maybe thinking about what you're doing on the Sabbath and how you're keeping the kids focused on Christ on the Sabbath will do you a world of good, and be able to make those presentations. Really think about it. Get it in your head why I'm doing what I'm doing, kids in my particular church doing on Sabbath, and is my Pathfinders going to be better for their Christian walk than not? And maybe all the Pathfinders in your church would keep the Sabbath nicely. And you know, if they do, that is wonderful. I've never met a whole church full of kids who would on their own, but there has to be one out there somewhere. If yours is that one, congratulations. So, I'm certain I've stepped on one or two toes, maybe a whole foot worth of them in this one, but really understand the topic in your mind clearly. Have that debate with your church board. Know the children. Talk to the church about it. Why is this good for our church or not? And then grow from there. And that's from my fireside to yours. I look forward to seeing your comments. And you can check the other YouTube videos out. Feel free to send suggestions. And somewhere floating here is a subscribe button. Please hit it. And please check them out. And I'll catch you next time. Bye.